Okay, it's hard to think of how the government could have made a bigger mess of the proposed super laws this week. I mean, not only has the Treasurer undermined confidence in the system, they've reignited the class war, pitting one group of saver against all others. They've also brought into question, what's next? First the super, then what? Capital gains tax, family trusts, franking credits again, even the family home? Well, who knows? Well, we know the family home is off the limits because the PM was forced to close the door on that last one when the Treasurer gave a train wreck of an interview and refused to rule out that your home could be next on the greedy government tax list. But hidden in the proposed super legislation, I have to say, is a truly dangerous idea. The government essentially wants to tax you on profits you haven't yet made. That is the essence of what they're proposing on unrealised gains tax. Let me explain. As it stands now, when you sell something and you make a profit, you pay the appropriate tax on that profit. Now, Treasurer Chalmers wants you to pay tax on the supposed profit, even if you actually haven't sold it. I'll break it down to one simple example. You own a stock on the share market. It's gone from $10 to $20. Well, under Chalmers' new plan, you'll pay tax on the extra $10 in value at the end of the financial year. It doesn't matter if it drops back to the original price the next day, you'll still have to pay the tax, even though it's now worth much less than what you valued it on the day before. This is a crazy policy. This is a basket case economic policy. Because if I can do it to stocks, I'll do it to everything else, including your investment properties eventually. It will destroy personal wealth and it will make it virtually impossible for individual investors to save with any confidence, at least within the superannuation system. I mean, the most incompetent government anywhere in the world, the Biden administration, they actually tried this trick and then they had to abandon it too. Clearly, our own Treasurer Chalmers, he's learned little in his time in the role, and it's also been lost on many that this proposal is also about helping the union-dominated industry funds, and it hurts those in self-managed super funds. That's the ideological class war coming out again. And the reason behind that is because industry funds, you see, have big illiquid assets, which they can determine the value of with the help of some sympathetic actuaries and valuers, because the market doesn't place a price on them every single day. And how they value those assets determines their returns and perhaps their future tax obligations. And that's how the industry funds have juiced their returns every single year. They take something that's a one of a kind, they put the book value of it up, even if it's not doing particularly well, and voila, your portfolio's performed much better than the comparisons. But now under the Chalmers model, they might, just maybe, might have to choose between paper returns or tax returns. Joining me now to discuss this is Queensland Senator Gerard Rennick. Senator, it's wonderful to have you on the show again. Thank you. This policy cannot possibly work, can it?
No, Cory, it can't. And I'm very familiar with this policy. It's a policy that's been thrown around by economists for about the last 30 years. And it's probably one of the dumbest ideas I've ever heard an economist come up with. And that's saying something, because economists are to the finance industry what climate scientists are to the science industry and what epidemiologists are to the health industry. They sit around in a room and come up with models and assumptions that can't be applied to the real world. And you raised a very good point there between liquid and illiquid assets in particular. It will be bad enough on things that are listed daily like stocks that at least you can determine the value of the share at the 30th of June, for example. But if you've got illiquid assets like land or buildings, and if you've got, say for example, you might be a businessman that's put your land in a super fund and then you pay rent back to that, that is going to be very difficult to determine what the value of the actual land is every year. And you will have to actually sell something else if that land value has gone up, because you can't sell the land that the business sits on. So it's going to be an extremely impractical measure to apply. It will be a bookkeeping and administrative nightmare, and it is going to create liquidity problems for businesses who are going to have to find cash and I'm not sure how they're going to actually determine the value and who gets to determine the value. Is the business going to have to go and get an auditor or a valuer to value their land every year or every 3 years and pay for that as well. So it's not only the tax you will have to pay on unrealised gains, but the cost of administrating the value of something. And then the next year you may have that value decline and you just end up getting the money back from the tax office. So there's just so many questions with this, but I can assure you it will not work.
Yeah, this is the problem, Senator. It has been proposed for 30 years, as you've talked about. It doesn't work in any practical or realistic measure. How has the great Treasurer who wants to reimagine capitalism as per the World Economic Forum, and he's written his treatise on it, how could they introduce such a ham-fisted, dumb policy and challenge not everyone's, but a lot of people's confidence in the superannuation system? It beggars belief for a new government.
Oh, that's very easy, Cory. That came straight out of Treasury and the boffins in Treasury. We've got over 1,000 people in Treasury that are overpaid, I can assure you, for what they do. And these guys would have been sitting around. These are some, they employ a lot of economists that have been sitting around talking about this for the last 30 years. Most of them would have actually started their careers in Treasury. They've done nothing but modelling. They've never had to reconcile a cash book or a chequebook or anything like that. So this is one of their ideas that, as I said, it's an idea that goes around in the economist world, and Treasury are full of economists who have very little real-world experience.
Ain't that the truth? And unfortunately, we've got plenty of politicians who have very little practical real-world experience either. Can I jump onto another thing? This is my new pet push for politics to actually do something worthwhile. Fish labelling, you probably heard it in the opening editorial. I spoke about it just earlier. Can the system be changed? Shouldn't people know the country of origin of the fish they're buying in a restaurant or in a fish and chip shop, just to make sure we're not eating the tainted goods that come out of some of the swamps of Southeast Asia?
Yeah, look, Cory, it sounds like a good idea, and I agree with it in principle. Just how hard it is. The onus will need to be on whoever that importer of the fish is to label it. We just don't want to see the pubs and the restaurants actually have to be held liable for that. The onus needs to be on the person that imports the seafood. But I definitely think it's a good idea, and we should also extend it to renewables as well, particularly batteries and cobalt, and make sure that none of those products have been made from third world countries. And we should also know how much carbon dioxide has been used to create these so-called renewable energy forms of energy as well, whether it be windmills or solar panels, because I think if we actually knew how much energy was used in creating those things, they certainly would become very uncompetitive very quickly. But in principle, absolutely, it should always be Australia first.
Yeah, touche, Senator Rennick. I can see the labels now. No child slaves were used in mining the cobalt for this battery. It's never going to happen because it's an inconvenient fact for too many of them. Thanks so much for your time tonight, Senator, and good luck this week as you go about your work.